Hi there, listener. Welcome in. This is Strange Stories from Odd Folks with an X. This episode's story is titled Omni-Ex, The Return, a sci-fi tale by Lee Hulme. Content warnings for this episode are deadly androids, described violence, swearing. Please remember to take good care of yourself. And with that, why don't we begin?
Ruff Antoya, commander of the battleship Apollo, woke up with a start as the emergency alarm sounded, kicking off a strobing yellow light above their door. What the? As he grumbled as he rolled out of bed, hastily pulled on their uniform, and splashed some water on their face and over their bald head. A tone from the door intercom alerted her to someone outside, and she exited the room, nodding at the young man to speak. Sir, there's ships. 4 of them. They're coming fast, and they aren't responding to our greetings, the young man said briskly, marching alongside his commander. Thank you, Mossad. Follow me to the CD, and we'll see what there is to be done. Jerry Mossad puffed out his chest slightly at the compliment of accompanying his commanding officer in a crisis. Usually, his place was under a table somewhere, fixing and tweaking engineering problems. Apprentice engineers rarely got to speak to the commander at all. He had been running diagnostics on one of the secondary navigation consoles when the ships had come into view. On receiving no response after repeated attempts, on seeing the ships continue to get closer, and on scanning them and finding heavy arms backed up by lots of technology, the second in command, Tracer Wilkes, had turned to the first non-essential person she saw and barked an order to get to the commander's quarters and explain. As Jerry ran, Tracer hit the alert, and the alarms began to sound. Not hectically yet, but enough for the entire ship to drop whatever else they were doing and run for their assigned battle stations. Ruff strode in, nodded to Tracer, and took their place at the center. Mossad, where's your usual station? Jerry looked around nervously. Engineering, Commander, balancing output. Not anymore. Find a console and stay there. From what I've heard about you, we might need to make good use of your targeting and patching skills. Jerry snapped to attention, a flush rising at the compliment, and saluted. Yes, Commander, he said, before striding, outwardly calm, to the console he had been working on earlier. Tracer glanced at Ruff, caught their eye, and gave a slight nod. Ruff moved one eyebrow, almost imperceptibly, their silent communication honed after a lifetime of working together. What do we have, Wilkes? Mossad said there were unidentified ships, heavily armed, not responding, but coming closer. Yes, Commander. That about covers the info I had when I sent him. But when we scanned deeper, we found more than just weapons. We found AI technology all over the place. It partially matches some of the scans from the Omni-Ex war, but it's different. Ruff gave his 2IC a concerned look. You think the Omnis are back after 2 centuries, and they've, what, evolved? Well, Tracer hesitated. From the code comparisons, it looks more like they've devolved, Commander. Explain. The old code samples are tight, solid, complex, high level, even on the lowest AI forms. The code we're getting from these is not. It's scattered, simplified. It's like it's mutated. or is still mutating? I can't really tell. If they're smart enough to fly those ships, they're smart enough to do damage. That's all I care about right now. All right, everyone, you know your drills. Watch those weapons for cycling up to fire. Get ours ready to return attack. Keep tracking everything that's trackable on them, and keep trying to talk to them. The rest of the command deck nodded in silence and tapped away at their consoles intently. Ruff turned to Tracer and motioned her over to speak quietly. You know the old stories. Tell me what you're thinking. Tracer hesitated. I know the lore we've scraped together, Commander, but that doesn't mean I know whatever really happened. We lost so much. Ruff waved this aside impatiently. I don't care about that. You know more about this than anyone else I have here. Tracer, I need that mind of yours right now. Talk to me. Tell me what you know and what you feel. I trust your mind and your gut. You know this. Rosa closed her eyes and breathed deeply for a moment. It's possible that this is unrelated to the Omni-Ex, but it reads so similar to the Type Zs they created to finish as R, not expecting them to try and finish the Omnis off too. After this amount of time, the code could be a mutated form of the virus, but it could also be something completely new. And it could just as likely be intentional as it could be accidental. All right, that's your brain. Now tell me what your gut says. I think it's them, the Type Zs, or whatever they've become after a couple of centuries. If they've infected or wiped out the Omni-X race completely, then we have no way of knowing what they are right now. Looking at the code, the devolution, the mutation, I guess nothing good. But I have nothing concrete to base that assumption on as yet. Still, if I'm even half right, we're boned, Commander. All right, well, let's see what we can do to get the hell away from them right now, and we can worry about the rest later. Yes, Commander. How would you like to move? Jump drive can be brought up in 6 minutes. Should get us out of range. Cycle it up and boost the shielding. Then send a final message asking them to respond. Stop moving closer, disarm weapons, whatever else you like. Tell them as nicely as you can to show us they're friendly, or we'll show them we're not. If no reply at 3 minutes to jump, fire a low energy warning pulse above their heads. See how they react. Then we're out of here. Grayson nodded and returned to her post, giving commands as she worked on the message. At jump minus 3 minutes, there had still been no reply, and the ships were now close enough to cause a lot of damage with their weapons. Tracer turned to Massard. Kid, you with me? Jerry nodded, face pale but determined. Yes, LT. Think you can fire a barely energized pulse above their heads? Don't brush by anything. Think fancy. Fire it at the ceiling. Yes, LT. Jerry's fingers moved across the console at top speed, targeting the empty space, lowering the energy level so it would be little more than a pulse of light. When ready, he glanced at Tracer, who nodded back. The entire command deck looked up at the view screen as the beam of yellow light left their ship, clearing the heads of the approaching craft by a wide margin and fading into the distance. A moment of silence passed. Grace's console beeped urgently, and she looked down. Sir, weapons are cycling. Barely had she spoken before a beam of blue light shot out from one of the approaching ships. The command deck barely had time to grab hold of something before it hit. "Status!" barked Ruff. Tracer looked down at her console for a damage report. "Shit! Commander, the jump drive. They hit it direct. It's down." Ruff shared a glance with Tracer. Both nodded. "Open fire. Take them down," Ruff ordered. "You heard him. All weapons, fire at will. Nav, combat evasion. Engineers, emergency repairs." Tracer commanded all battle stations, though everyone should have arrived there at the initial alarm. It was still procedure before kicking it up a notch, and sent out a quick prayer. She knew they all knew their drills, but most of them had never been tested in a live fight. This was meant to be a training mission. A few veterans at the top, like herself and Ruff. A bunch of greenies at the bottom finishing up their training, like Jerry, and a bit of everything in between, mostly prepping for promotions. She hoped and prayed that muscle memory from the drills would override everything else that their brains were trying to shout about right now. Soon the screen was filled with pulses, bolts, and beads of yellow light as all the ship's weapons fired toward the four approaching craft. As one, the craft split off, avoiding the first rally. But it looked like, so far at least, people were keeping it together. The biggest test came next, however. "Flight squadrons, hustle!" Tracy shouted into the comms. Down in the flight deck, 2 squadrons of fighters, on standby up until 20 seconds ago, hustled. Cockpits slammed closed. Idling engines cycled upwards. The double line prepared to move forward along the conveyor belt that would shoot them out of the ship like bullets from a gun. Squad leaders Jinx and Bruta nodded to each other across the way. "Squad 1, roll out," Jinx commanded, her voice a growl as she released her own fighter, feeling the push on her chest, pinning her beneath the 7-point harness and racing for the opening flight doors. "Lexi, on my tail," Brutus snarled, facing down his own track. The fighters streamed out of the Apollo, forming into chevrons, dipping down or sideways as they aimed for the oncoming craft. The craft were now firing back, but not at the Apollo. Easily avoiding most of the fire from the larger ship, seeming to absorb what did hit with relative ease, it seemed they had been waiting for this. Before anyone on Apollo had a chance to react, a spray of fire came from each of the enemy craft, and in moments the air was filled with debris. Both squadrons were destroyed completely. The stunned silence on the command deck was broken as the ship suddenly reformed and sped toward the Apollo. "Brittany!" shouted Ruff. "Do not let them get close enough to do whatever the hell they want to do." But as Benj, commanding the navigation team, swore to himself and tried to pull the ship off to one side in order to run, each approaching ship sent one ball of blue light towards them. The Apollo reeled, the lights flickered, and the engines were dead. "How the hell did they get to the engines?" Tracer cried. "What in the fuck are they firing?" "Auxiliary power," asked Ruff, as the ships loomed large on the view screen, now dipping below them. "What the fuck are they up to?" "No auxiliary, Commander. It's there. It's just the engines are fried." Tracer left the last question unanswered, having no response to give. The Apollo, moving only on momentum now, held its breath. Tracer stared at her console, tracking the enemy ships. They're coming to the flight deck." She opened the comm channel. "Close the goddamn doors! They're coming your way!" The engineers on the flight deck started and looked at each other in terror. But two of them hit the emergency shut, and the doors began to close. Slowly. Too slowly. Tracer watched, praying the ships would slow on their final approach, giving the doors time to close. Instead, the ships simply shot the mechanism that moved the doors, blowing the whole works backwards onto the conveyors, and kept coming. On the console, she saw them come close, very close, and stop. This close it was easy to see they were too big to actually fit inside, but they were definitely up to something. Looking over Tracer's shoulder, Ruff frowned. They're trying to board? The comms opened up from the flight desk, as if in answer. Commander, it looks like they're attaching something to us, like a tunnel or something, over the exit. It's opening. There's something coming out. They look human. Could it be some of ours? New ships, just stopping us from hurting them before they could make contact. The hope in the speaker's voice chilled Tracer badly. The hell out of there! Lock it off and get out! But they're human, LT. They look like us, although, well, they mostly look like us. Their skin, it shines like it's flesh and metal. The voice drifts off dreamily before the speaker, who must be one of the engineering grunts, though Tracer can't quite tell which, snaps back together. Right, yes. LT, we're leaving. Everybody, clear the deck. Get behind the blast doors now. The comms remained open, playing the bustle of the flight crew as they attempted to follow orders, the occasional burst of speech coming through. Leave everything behind, damn it, what are you doing? But they're human. I mean, they're different. They had to survive somehow. Do they look human to you? Just because they have our shapes? They are not human. Their skin, their eyes, the way they walk really fast, like shit. God damn it, run! They're here. How are they so fast? What are they doing? It's like they're trying to hug us. That is not hugging. Hugging doesn't involve teeth. Just fucking run. The comms crackled to screams, roars, dying. Finally there was a laugh that gurgled, as if it came through clotted blood. A crash signaled the destruction of the transmitter, and the comms went silent. Tracer looked at Ruff. Commander? I think we must assume they're gone. Open up the rest of the comms. Tracer did so, and stepped back from the console. This is Commander Antoya. Ruff's voice betrayed only a slight tremor. We can confirm that the enemy ships have docked, and that some of their crew are aboard. The flight deck team are, as far as we can tell, dead. Grab whatever weapons you can. Some food, some water, some friends. Get yourself somewhere behind heavy doors and lock them. Use the comms. Keep in touch with each other. Do not engage unless forced. We will be trying to find a solution. A solution? Tracer asked quietly. You wanted me to tell them to sit on their buns until these fuckers rip their doors off and walk right in, unaffected by any of the things they could fire at them. Would that have helped? Ruff sighed. Sorry, I don't mean to snap. Tracer, I have no idea what to do. Tracer nodded. Yeah, doesn't mean we have to like it, but yeah. So, what? We hunker down? Hope we can find a way to fight when they get here? Any better ideas? Not really. Then hunker away. Ruff turned a slow circle, looking the rest of the command deck crew in the eye, faltering a moment as he saw Jerry trying desperately not to shake. Well, folks, if you have any bright ideas, this would be the time to shout them out. If not, grab a weapon, and we'll see if we can at least give them a few bruises, right? When command finds the ship, hopefully the black box, the comms, and whatever's left will help them. The comms crackled, and a female voice spoke quietly. I'm in the hold. They're here, LT, and the door. It's not going to. The sound of the door being wrenched open made Tracer jump. Gunfire, shouts, screams, a roar of victory. I guess that answers any doubts about the weapons, Ruff said softly. Tracer, lock the doors and turn off the comms. Hearing this is not going to help. Tracer nodded, keyed a button to deadlock the door, and muted all comms channels. The lights continued to flicker on her console, though, showing people talking to each other, probably trying to speak to them. She tracked each as they came in, the colours and flashes of codes she knew well. A low light, just someone speaking. A long jump into orange, the door was opened. Flashes of red showing spurts of gunfire, screams, laughter. She saw them all, and wept quietly. Ruff took her by the shoulder and led her away, joining the rest of the crew, now grouped together on the floor in the centre of the command deck, where a holographic image normally offered maps. Now they all huddled together, sharing comfort and fear. After an eternity of silence, there was a soft thud on the door. Made from 6 inches of thick metal, deadlocked closed, the door should have been a final emergency defense against boarding. It was heavier and sturdier than any of the other inner doors on the ship. Tracer guessed it might take them at least 3 tries to smash their way through. Another thud, just as soft, then more around the edges and through the middle. They're testing it, Ruff whispered to Tracer. The bastards are testing for weakness. Well, there is none in that door. They'll have to go right through the goddamn middle and make that bastardized head smash into pieces. Finally, there were a few moments of silence. The command deck crew held their breath. At the same time, they all started, some with a shout. The door was bowing inwards at the centre. A hairline fracture appeared across the middle. It's been my great pleasure to work with you all, Ruff said, checking the weapon. Safety's off. Max power. See what you can do. The hinges groaned and buckled. Which first, do you reckon? Middle or hinges? Tracer asked with a nervous chuckle. There was no need for Ruff to reply, as the hinges collapsed and the door exploded inwards at speed, clipping the edge of a console and spinning towards the group in the middle of the room. With no time to react, those in the way were simply smashed aside like rag dolls, hitting the wall with half a dozen thuds, the crewmen mercifully, hopefully, dead before the door joined them with a loud clang. Stepping through the door were creatures of human shape, but taller. Their hair was white, in varying styles. Their eyes were green, almost luminous. Their skin flashed a metallic blue under the light. Their faces were covered in blood. It dripped from their mouths, down their fitted leather outfits to the floor. The four creatures leapt forwards as if on cue. The 7 humans that remained raised their sidearms and began to fire, without hope that it would do any good. They passed by Ruff, Tracer, and Jerry, moving in sync to grab the others, bend their heads back, and tear their throats out with their teeth. Dropping the bodies to the floor, one watched over them, while the other 3 turned back to the remaining crew. The leader looked Ruff in the eye and snarled, "Remember us, creature?" Ruff drew herself up and nodded. "We have some memories of you. The stories we have say you, the Omni-Ex, were different." Their leader shortened, droplets of blood spraying from its mouth. "We were, until you went too far. You made us humans. We remade ourselves. You call us Omni-Ex still? Those who thought themselves enlightened? No. We are the descendants. We are the amalgamation, the evolved. And now, we make you ours." Jerry backed away, firing his weapon. The evolved simply gurgled blood and advanced, backing him into a corner before lunging and biting into his cheek. Ruff struggled against the grip of the leader, but when he raised their hands to punch, the evolved simply whipped its head into one, seizing it in its mouth and biting down. As Ruff hit the floor, white with shock, the leader chewed on the fingers it had bitten off and watched the human until he fainted. Tracer ducked, dodged, and came up behind the one heading her way. With a leap, she was on its back, strangling, digging in fingers, trying to find some way through its surface. The evolved simply threw itself forwards, flipping over and landing them both on their backs with a solid thud. Tracer cried out as ribs cracked, and again as the evolved rolled over, stood, and yanked her upright by one hand until she was dangling in midair. With a swift, darting motion, the evolved's head shot forwards, bit down, and came back chewing a nose. Tracer screamed until a fist to the side of her head sent the pain away. The leader looked around the deck and nodded. "This is the first. There are more. Soon, we will have knowledge of the rest of the humans. They will be made like us."
Thank you so much for listening. That was Omni-Ex: The Return, written, read, and edited by Lee Hulme. If you are LGBTQIA2S+, and you'd like to submit a story for use, we'd love to hear from you. Check the show notes for a link to do that. Also in the show notes, you will find info on the music, sound effects, and where else you can find us. We love visitors, so do come and say hi.